It's Tuesday, everyone. You're watching CBC News BC. I'm Benit Brach, and here's what we're following this afternoon. Well, Prime Minister Mark Carney's new cabinet ministers have been sworn in this morning, and a few frontrunners from BC, including former Vancouver Mayor turned MP Gregor Robertson. He will be Canada's new Minister for Housing. SFU political science senior lecturer Sanjay Jaram says that Robertson's appointment stuck out to him.
It's been a role that's changed hands quite a few times in the last some odd time of the Trudeau government and moving into the Carney government. So obviously there's been there's concerns that file has not been moved as quickly or has been as linear in progression on something that is obviously so important to Canada, housing prices and sort of affordability. So I do think that's a really interesting appointment, one that will catch, I think, some eyes, especially given that he was the mayor of Vancouver, where the problem is obviously centralized, Vancouver and Toronto being the cities that are the affordability crisis most acute. So that is interesting to watch.
Other names in the new cabinet from BC include Jill McKnight, the MP for Delta. She's the Minister of Veteran Affairs and Associate Minister of National Defence. Stephen Fuhr, the MP for Kelowna, is Secretary of State for Defence Procurement. And Randeep Sarai, the MP for Surrey Centre, is Secretary of State for International Development. And the BC Utilities Commission has ordered FortisBC to suspend its plan to proactively cut electricity to some communities when wildfires become a major threat. So Fortis had described this as a last resort measure to protect communities and critical infrastructure. But it was also met with lots of pushback, especially from the mayor of Princeton. And BC's energy minister says that this pause will bring better dialogue on this plan.
Tells Fortis essentially to come back to the BCUC for a significant review of that policy, which will give everyone a chance to have their views heard on the issue. This is the role of the BCUC. It's a regulator of Fortis as a private utility in the province, and I think their approach on the circumstance makes sense and probably makes sense for Fortis as well.
Dix also referred to the damage that utilities faced in California when the wildfires were raging there. And he says it is reasonable for Fortis to reflect on the threats and challenges of climate change and wildfires. And today is also the annual Mosaic Job Fair in New Westminster. This is an all-day event where job seekers can network, they can explore different work opportunities from a variety of different industries in the province. Job seekers going to the fair have been telling us that finding a job is really challenging right now.
It is very tough because the market is very competitive, and unless you have connections, you wouldn't get in.
I am working as a seasonal job back in Richmond, but I want much more job stability and much more job security.
Now that our students are struggling for new jobs and after they graduate, especially for all these policies change that affect their long-term planning career-wise or life-wise. So I think it's helpful for us from an educator, from an education institution to come out here and then try to build those relationships.
March figures from Statistics Canada show that BC's employment rate had a small gain compared to the month before. And in January, official figures showed that youth unemployment is on the rise. And you are updated this afternoon. You're watching CBC News BC. And up next is BC Today. Stay with us.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. When he was Vancouver mayor, Gregor Robertson took aim at the federal government for not stepping up in tackling affordable housing. Well, today he becomes the federal government's housing minister. What do you think of the choice? We'll talk to current Vancouver City Councillor Bligh, as well as longtime journalist Frances Bula. At 12:45, Carsim Birmingham is taking his beautiful, soulful vocals to the finals of Canada's Got Talent. We'll hear just how big this moment is for the Vancouver singer. I'm Michelle Elliott. Welcome to BC Today. Prime Minister Mark Carney has named 28 members of Parliament to his new cabinet, with another 10 MPs appointed Secretaries of State. Among those sworn in are 5 MPs from BC. Half the new ministers have not been in cabinet before, and Carney highlighted his new cabinet as a mandate for change.
Canadians elected this new government with a strong mandate to define a new economic and security relationship with the United States, and to build a stronger economy for all Canadians. Canadians also sent a clear message that their cost of living must come down and that our communities must be safe. The swearing in of this cabinet is amongst the fastest following an election, and the beginning of the new parliament will be one of the most rapid following an election in Canadian history. We are starting as we aim to go on. Our government will deliver its mandate for change with urgency and determination.
Well, notably included is former Vancouver Mayor Gregor Robertson, who will become Canada's Minister of Housing and Infrastructure.
I, Gregor Robertson, do solemnly and sincerely promise and declare that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trusts reposed in me as Minister of Housing and Infrastructure and Minister responsible for the Pacific Economic Development Canada.
And 4 other ministers from BC were sworn in. Delta MP Jill McKnight will take over Veterans Affairs, plus 3 Secretaries of State. Surrey Centre MP Randeep Sarai for International Development, Kelowna's Stephen Fuhr for Defence Procurement, and Stephanie McLean, MP for Esquimalt Saanich Sooke, will be Secretary for Seniors. Well, let's talk about Gregor Robertson now. When he was first elected mayor of Vancouver with Vision Vancouver back in 2008, yes, think back to then, he promised to end homelessness in the city by 2015. That didn't happen. Throughout his 3 terms, the city pursued more social housing and shelters, but homelessness continued and shot up, as did rents and real estate prices. Now, at the time, Robertson pointed the finger at senior governments. Today, he is in Ottawa and is Minister for Housing and Infrastructure. What do you think of the choice? How do you think Robertson will do, and what does he need to achieve? You can call us now, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone as well. Or you can email bctoday@cbc.ca. And joining me now for some reaction is Vancouver City Councillor, Independent Councillor Bligh, also President of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me, Michelle.
It's good to talk to you. What is your initial reaction? Gregor Robertson is Housing Minister.
Yes, well, of course, initial reaction is congratulations to Minister Gregor Robertson on this cabinet appointment. I think it is a file that is incredibly important, a portfolio that was topping the platform for the federal Liberal campaign in terms of their deliverables. $500,000 housing units delivered each year, as well as a recognition that critical infrastructure upgrades go along with housing, as well as the need for broad-scale economic development. So he's got a big job ahead of him, covering all 3 commitments in that platform.
And it was a big job back when he was mayor as well in the city. And by the time he left office in 2018, you ran for council in 2018 under the NPA. A lot of criticism from the NPA about what Vision Vancouver did over those 10 years. Rents did go up. The prices of condos went up. Homelessness continued and was up by then. I mean, what kind of legacy did he leave for councillors like yourself?
Well, I think it's a really important conversation to be had today because nobody knows greater than the new minister how challenging it is to deal with homelessness, a growing challenge of homelessness, not just in our city, but across our province and in fact across the country. In my role as president of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, we have heard from members, of which we cover 2,100 member municipalities, 92% of the population of Canada, that homelessness has been a growing issue in their communities, surged after COVID, but leading up to that as well, not just urban centers, but right across the country in all size municipalities. So this is a federal challenge, and it needs provincial partners as well as municipal governments that are going to enable the types of housing that are going to help address this crisis. Nobody knows more about those in the weeds specifics than a previous mayor of the city of Vancouver, of which, of course, the minister is.
How much faith do you have, given what he wasn't able to accomplish as mayor of Vancouver? How much faith do you have that he will do a good job as federal minister of housing?
Well, as I say, as a city councillor here in Vancouver, two-term city councillor, we have had our fair share of discussions and debates and challenges in getting the appropriate level of senior government funding into our city to not just address the homelessness crisis, but to address the need of housing at every level of affordability. And much of that in a Vancouver scale requires senior government funding, both at the provincial and federal level. So I am optimistic. I'm naturally optimistic. So we have to remain hopeful that we'll be able to move the needle in this coming term of this new cabinet and this new government. But, even just their return back to Parliament so quick shows some urgency. And we certainly at FCM and at our city here in the city of Vancouver are going to help fan those flames of that fire that needs action now to deal with the challenges we're facing.
And what would moving the needle look like for you? What's something specific that you're looking for, like in the next 6 months?
Well, here I'm wearing two hats, of course, right?
Yeah.
So as president of FCM, we recognize that the Canadian Prosperity Partnership, a national conversation around how to better fund municipalities that are facing budgets that cannot sustain the types of upgrades and infrastructure needed to deliver the kinds of housing that the federal government has committed to. So we're looking at having a structured conversation around modernizing revenue streams that fund municipal budgets. People don't realize municipalities across the country own over 60% of the infrastructure in our country that holds up our communities, yet only receives 8 to 10 cents on the dollar. So this isn't about raising taxes, it's getting a fair share of revenue into communities so we can sustainably grow our communities that responds to the opportunity we have before us, meeting the moment that we have before us, which is about a stronger, more resilient, prosperous country, and that starts in our municipalities.
And how does that work in Vancouver specifically? We're waiting a comment from Vancouver Mayor Carsim. This is a mayor who said no more supportive housing, right? No more new supportive housing. So what is that relationship going to look like between Vancouver's mayor and the housing minister?
Well, I certainly think that's an appropriate question for the mayor when you do hear from him. But from my perspective, I was quite vocal and continue to be that we need a balance of services right across the board. We need stronger mental health and addiction support. We need all types of housing. We cannot, for as long as we have over 2,500 folks who are unhoused in our city, we can't say no to supportive housing. We need to continue to build the right kind of housing with the right kinds of supports. A lot of the challenges we face are that folks are living in housing like SROs that simply are not safe. They are not self-contained units. They don't have adequate bathrooms. They are vulnerable to criminal activity. That type of housing has come to the end of its life. We need a proper plan to replace it.
Councillor Bligh, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
That is Vancouver City Councillor, Independent Councillor Rebecca Bligh. She's also president of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. Now, following the ceremony this morning, Prime Minister Mark Carney was also asked about the selection of Robertson as housing minister, and here's what he had to say.
We have a strong view on housing, a very clear policy, a policy developed with a number of members of the team, including with Mr. Robertson, and I'm thrilled that he is in the new role because he brings the type of experience that we need to tackle some aspects of this problem. One of them is is how the federal government can help get municipal costs and municipal regulation costs down and regulation out of the way so that more houses can be built. Ultimately, a housing crisis, and it is a crisis, is ultimately solved by supply.
That's Prime Minister Mark Carney speaking this morning. 12:16 now. You're with BC Today. And Cabinet turned out to be a major overhaul with 24 new faces. This morning, political strategist Karim Alam joined CBC's The Early Edition and watched it all unfold. And here's what he took away from the infusion of new blood in the Cabinet and its two tiers.
As we said, a two-tier cabinet with a number of ministers and then a number of secretaries of state, and Stephen Fuhr from Kelowna among the secretaries of state.
Yeah, I think that going back to this two-tiered model of cabinet is something more reminiscent of what we saw in the Maroney and the Chrétien era. So it's a tighter ministry or a tighter cabinet or executive council. The power of cabinet really resides in that executive council. That's where they have the authority to really, under legislation, to really exercise a lot of statutory authority. So having a smaller cabinet will make it for more nimble decision making, and I think that's what Mark Carney has been signaling with this announcement today.
Well, on Gregor Robertson, we are asking you what you think of the choice of the former mayor of Vancouver becoming Canada's Minister of Housing and Infrastructure. Scott writes us an email from Burnaby. It's crucial to address the root of our housing crisis, the soaring cost of land. Implementing a 1% land use fee, fully returned to residents as a citizen dividend, could provide a family of four with $1,600 monthly. This approach not only tackles housing affordability, but also combats hunger and ensures food security for Canadians. It's a sustainable solution that empowers communities and should be a top priority for Minister Robertson. Scott, thank you very much. Our email is bctoday@cbc.ca. We do have a statement from Vancouver Mayor Carsim now on the appointment of former Mayor of Vancouver, Gregor Robertson, as Housing Minister. And Carsim states Minister Robertson understands firsthand the challenges and opportunities that cities face when it comes to housing and infrastructure. His experience will be an asset to the federal government. I look forward to connecting with him soon. The federal government has a critical role to play in helping cities meet the urgent demand.
Okay.
That statement coming from Mayor Carsim. Well, we're asking you, what do you think of Gregor Robertson being named Housing Minister? How do you think he'll do? And what does he need to do? You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can also just hit pound 690 on your cell phone or email us bctoday@cbc.ca. Globe and Mail reporter Frances Bula has covered Gregor Robertson from back in the day all the way to today. How are you?
Oh, I feel like I'm in a Dickens novel where you think a character has disappeared and then they come back.
Yeah.
They're there again. They never really go away.
No.
So
Yeah, I know. Which Christmas is this? So what do you think of this choice?
Well, as soon as I heard that Gregor Robertson was going to be running, I knew he was going to get a cabinet position. There's no way he would have agreed to be a candidate and sit in the back bench. Not somebody like him who wants to get things done. I thought it might be environment. Housing is an obvious choice as well. It's going to be interesting because he obviously has a track record in Vancouver and a very polarizing one. There are people who completely loathe him to this day and blame him for skyrocketing prices from when he was in 2008 to 2018. Right. Blame him for foreign investors, buying so much in Vancouver. Blame him for many things. So,
yeah. How much of that is fair? Like, what's fair and what's not, Frances?
It's so hard because we've seen every city deal with the problems that kind of hit Vancouver first. In fact, one of the things that I find sadly enjoyable about the recent years is when I first used to cover housing, because I started covering it in about 1999, and for a long time, nobody was interested, and especially back east. That was like some weird Vancouver thing that you guys have terrible housing prices, and we don't care, we're doing fine, and you solve it on your own. And so it has hit every city, every major city in North America, and it doesn't matter whether it's Democrat or Republican or liberal or conservative. It has hit everywhere.
Yeah, it does feel like Vancouver was the canary in the coal mine on that. And for a while, it was seen as a sort of payday for people who owned homes at the time, right?
Oh, yeah. Remember, anyone who owned, they'd all be happily, merrily exchanging their assessment values as of January the 1st.
It was, watching the numbers was like, oh my God, the lottery. So, and it's just interesting to see what what you see as something he did achieve. Like, what was the progress that he made?
Well, I mean, in spite of the fact that he did not end street homelessness as he, came into office promising to do, he did move things along. And, one of the things I'm expecting from him, he's been in business. He's a guy who likes to get things done. When he came in as mayor, he fired the city manager. He hired new city managers, Penny Ballum, and then a new deputy city manager from Chicago. And he has had a really strong team around him, and he decided what he was going to do, and he did it. And that's why you see so much polarization, because some people think what he did was good. He did, for example, in tackling homelessness, convene a roundtable about what can we do immediately. And one of the things that we now have in Vancouver, because of Gregor Robertson, is winter shelters.
Heat shelters,
that happen all winter. Before, it used to be they would only open like if it was really cold or rainy. There are now winter shelters that operate from November to March.
At the same time, zoning was really put at his feet, right? That lack of expanding zoning or keeping zoning to single-family homes in areas where there were these nice, big, beautiful homes.
Yeah, that came more towards the end. Like what happened in his era was at first things were kind of, not great, but not too bad. But then this foreign investor housing crisis erupted. And at first, that's one of the things I have to say, he was kind of slow to react to that. And at first he dismissed it as, racism or, various other things. And finally, he went to the province and asked for an empty homes tax, which was like the first measure really to try to deal with that issue. But it was hard for him to move off his original approach, which was when they started in 2008, like the global financial crisis. And so a lot of incentivization of private market rental.
Right.
That really started with him.
Let's take some calls now. We're asking you, what do you think of the choice of former Vancouver Mayor Gregor Robertson becoming the Minister of Housing and Infrastructure? Our numbers again, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, or you can just hit pound 690. Our email address is bctoday@cbc.ca. And my guest, Frances Bula, longtime journalist and with the Globe and Mail now. Let's go to Ucluelet, and Daryl is on the line. Hi, Daryl.
Hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. What are your thoughts on this choice?
Well, I've been involved in some social issues in several countries, Australia and here. I lived in both. We have these problems are interlinked with poverty, and until the jurisdictions start giving money to that is adequate for people to have housing security and food security, it's very. We're going to have continued problems of this nature, and I also think that there should be some consideration, and I hope they do. I have full confidence in the intelligence of Mr. Carney to steer this ship. Life in Canada is what we make it, and that is emphasized by the Trump issue in the States.
And so you're saying it's get to the root causes of like poverty then, Daryl?
Well, we have to get to the root causes, and something happened in Canada where the speculation by foreign ownership was something that wasn't allowed at one time in Australia until a Conservative government got in.
And that's been limited here now, right?
Well, I'm not too sure, but foreign ownership certainly is a problem. I mean, I lived in the West End down by the Bay Shore, and at any given night, you could see countless high-rises that were empty.
Pardon me, Daryl, and that is the one of the issues that Frances has brought up here. Since then, we've had the speculation tax from the province, the vacancy tax, and we've had, as you said, the empty homes tax, and this kind of ban on federal foreign buyers. Like, has that been addressed, the issue of foreign investors?
Well, I think that the three levels of government have done what is possible. I mean, you have an empty homes tax in the city, you have a speculation tax in the province, you have a foreign investor ban at the federal level. One of the things that's going to be interesting is developers are telling me and everyone that they can't do projects anymore. Projects are failing, and there's a lack of capital in the country. And there's going to be pressure on this government to loosen up some of that some of those foreign investor limits.
That's interesting. I mean, I want to ask you about, if you've been watching the condo prices and the condo market slowing down as well, as we saw that big announcement from Rennie last Friday. So that's probably
right. And I had a story in today's paper about Bassano, Buffo Developments, canceling pre-sales outright on a tower and just giving everyone their money back. That's not a good sign for the market.
Well, and that's an interesting kind of new context for that Gregor Robertson is coming into. Let's take another call here before the news update at 12:30. Mehdi in Victoria. Hi, Mehdi.
Thank you for taking my call. I don't think they are going to solve the problem. Mr. Carney repeating the talking point of developers that there is a supply problem. We don't have supply problem. We have affordability problem, and private developers cannot solve that problem. What we need to do, go back to 60s and 70s, when government got involved and publicly built housing and crash the prices, and that's when people will get their places that they can live with dignity. This type of solution, Mr. Robertson, if we could have solved the problem in Vancouver, we wouldn't have the problem right now in Vancouver. He is not the solution. Thank you.
Mehdi, thank you so much. Calling from Victoria, where, of course, housing is a big issue. The Liberals and Mark Carney have promised this new federal body that will look at, oversee the building of new housing. I mean, I haven't heard today, but how much of a role do you think Gregor Robertson might play in that?
Well, that would be huge. And I'm going to be interested to see what actually happens, because the private development industry thinks that whole thing is stupid. You know, why should the government set up an agency when there's a lot of developers who are very experienced and so on? They think that the federal government should work together with private developers the way the province is with BC Builds. So I think that, there may be some modification of that with Mr. Robertson as the housing minister, who has extremely close ties, I have to say, to the provincial government.
Yes, we'll talk about that then. I know that Minister Ravi Kahlon was asked about him this morning in a scrum, but let's just pause here now. It is just about 12:30 now. You're with BC Today here on CBC. Again, taking your calls, Prime Minister Mark Carney has introduced and announced his new cabinet. And one of them, who is from BC, is Gregor Robertson, one of 5 ministers and secretaries of state from BC. And Gregor Robertson, former Vancouver mayor, becomes housing minister. What do you think of the choice? Our numbers, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. Back with Frances Bula and your calls right after this CBC News Update with Rob Zimmerman.
Good afternoon. A Kelowna man has pleaded guilty to killing a female security guard at UBC Okanagan 3 years ago. Harmandeep Kaur was brutally assaulted in a building on campus. Dante Algnabin Heborn, who was a custodian at the building, pleaded guilty to manslaughter. A sentencing hearing is taking place today. TransLink is warning travelers that the Patella Bridge between Surrey and New Westminster will be shut to all traffic over the long weekend. It says the closure is required to safely install drainage and complete foundations for the new replacement bridge project. And as we've been hearing on the show, 5 BC MPs have been named to Prime Minister Mark Carney's new cabinet, including former Vancouver Mayor Gregor Robertson as housing minister. Robertson will take on the high-profile role as the government looks to build more homes. Delta MP Jill McKnight is the Minister of Veterans Affairs and Associate Minister of National Defence. There are also 3 Secretaries of State from BC. And now the forecast on the North Coast. Periods of rain tapering off, then cloudy with a high of 11. Highs reaching 20 with a mix of sun and cloud this afternoon in the Peace. In the central interior, including Prince George, some sun and cloud with a high of 19. Highs to 19 with a chance of showers and thunderstorms in the Kootenays. In the southern interior, including Kelowna, sunny breaks with a high of 21. And mainly cloudy this afternoon in the Fraser Valley. Some sunshine in Metro Vancouver and Greater Victoria, with highs around 18. That's your CBC News update from Vancouver.
Rob, thank you very much. That's Robert Zimmerman in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. This is BC Today here on CBC. I'm Michelle Elliott, and we are following up on what you just heard in the news update there and asking you, Gregor Robertson being named housing minister. What do you think? Our numbers are 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. And my guest is urban affairs writer and journalist, Globe and Mail reporter Frances Bula. Let's go to Sandy in Vancouver. Hi, Sandy.
Hi there. I just have a quick question. I live in Riley Park area. The very first social housing in 1954 was 33rd and Main area. And under Gregor Robertson's reign, he had it, he sold it. He evacuated all the tenants and privatized it, and it is still mostly sitting vacant to this day.
Oh, you're talking about Little Mountain?
Yeah, and I'm just wondering if this is, to do something like that, is this the right fella,
Sandy, thank you so much. Yeah, Frances.
Well, actually, it wasn't Gregor Robertson who did that. So sorry, Sandy. It was the provincial government under Rich Coleman who organized that whole deal. And I don't think the city was thrilled about it at all. And at one point, they forced Holborn, who was the developer who bought it, for $30 million down and several more million to pay someday. But they forced them to put in at least one block of social housing a bit earlier than they had. So that was, a terrible deal. It's a landmark bad housing deal, but it was done by the province.
And so that goes to, what happened under his watch, I guess, right? What happened under Gregor Robertson's watch? What could he do and what could he not? Sandy, thank you so much for the call. Joseph is up next now in White Rock. And Joseph, go ahead. You have some thoughts here.
Hey, your guest just made one of my points. Gregor Robertson will probably be fine, but I honestly think it's a no-win job. I don't care if it's a Conservative government or a Liberal government.
Pardon me, we missed that, Joseph. What is you think it's what kind of job?
No win.
I don't think it's a no-win job.
Got it.
Because like your guest said, I mean, when the government's like in this case, the thing that worries me the most is the federal government's talking about getting into the housing business. That's a bad idea. Once governments get involved in this sort of thing, whether it's a city government, any city who's tried to build a housing development, provincial or federal, it never works because governments change, rules change. I know people personally who build high-rise apartment buildings and are in the realty game selling those buildings. And the biggest problem they have to build rentals, which is the future, is regulations. There's tons and tons of regulations, and that's what's stopping people from building.
What do you think then, Joseph? We had an earlier call from Mehdi in Victoria who said we need to go back to before the 80s, before the federal government, pulled out of being involved in purpose-built rental housing. Like, what role can the government play in that then? Ensuring that there is affordable housing.
Well, all I know is that when people say affordable housing, like even, I don't know in Vancouver, but like when, for instance, in Calgary, for instance, they build Alberta government builds affordable housing, but it turns into a ghetto. Like it's sad to say, but I think the government, if they want to get involved in housing, and considering rentals are the future in Canada and in the United States, it just comes down to regulations to inspire builders. And if the government wants to get involved instead of wasting money there, help the builders out and help with financing or whatever. But don't get into building businesses. All I'm really saying.
And we'll see what
do you think of that, guest? I mean, that sort of
Frances Bula, yeah. What do you think of that? Because you touched
can
on
tell
this
I'm
earlier.
Just waiting to weigh in.
Yeah.
I mean, I definitely hear from developers. Yeah, every time you change the regulations yet again, it just messes us up, makes it impossible because bigger buildings are planned over years and years. Generally, they do like things that the Trudeau Liberals brought in terms of helping with financing, like there's a program for low-cost financing for apartment buildings that was brought in as an early part of the Liberal housing plan, and that's supposed to continue. There's another one with mortgage guarantees. They still haven't gotten back into direct subsidies for social housing, and it's hard to imagine how bad things would have to get for them to do that. Housing is a terrible file for governments because it takes $10 billion to move the needle like the smallest amount.
And it goes to, what kind of relationship does he need to have? You talked about relationship with the provincial government, and what about with builders as well? And what kind of accountability would there be for developers to ensure that, it's not going to be luxury condos?
Well, the reality that no one wants to accept is you cannot build housing for the lowest income people in this country or in any country, given current building standards. If we could all go back to building tenements with zero fire safety rules, yes, sure. Currently, you can't. So there has to be some level of subsidy for that. But then 90% of housing is built by the private market. So to get that going, financing help, get out of the way. Various developers have said, get away from everything bagel liberalism, where you have a housing program, but then it's, it has to be affordable and it has to be sustainable and it has to be accessible and it has to, be particularly targeted to these 5 different groups and so on. So I think what everyone's looking for is less complicated and support for building private housing, and then something to bolster low-cost housing that realistically no private developer in the world is able to manage anymore.
Well, here's the kind of housing that we keep hearing about from our callers, co-op, and James is on the line from Vancouver. Hi, James.
Hi there. Yeah, I used to live in a co-op housing project. It was an excellent and very successful program which provided for market rents for some of the tenants and subsidized rent for people on lower incomes. And the co-ops were democratically managed by the tenants. It was very successul. Unfortunately, the Chrétien government shut it down in the mid-90s when Paul Martin was finance minister. But this idea that public housing is always a boondoggle and it's never successful and just ends up wasting taxpayers' money is simply untrue. Co-op housing program is very successful, and it's something that the government could start doing again today. The fact is we've had a private sector kind of housing program since the mid-90s. It's been very unsuccessful. Real estate prices just keep going up, and even now with the economic problems with the tariffs and stuff, they're still very high and still unaffordable for many people. So I just wanted to speak out in favor of public housing projects like co-ops, because it's a myth that they are not financially viable.
James, thank you very much. We've certainly heard from the Co-op Housing Association here on the show. Have we seen an expansion or any interest in expanding co-op housing?
I mean, there has been some, and I don't know the details of it, but we have seen some new co-op housing. I mean, there was at least one building in the Olympic Village in 2010, and there's been a limited amount elsewhere. I don't think it's seen as a massive supply program that's going to make a huge dent. But that combined with this new thing that is becoming very popular, community land trusts, all kinds of other things to support nonprofits as they are trying to build or acquire new housing, like something that BC started was this $500 million fund for nonprofits to buy private, smaller apartment buildings. And if there was a federal program like that, that would help them even more. Because what you want in the kind of housing system we're evolving to, where you cannot, as I said, build housing cheap enough for the poorest people to live in. It's physically impossible. So you have to try to remove as much as you can from the regular market and protect it through having nonprofits own it, having it in co-ops, having community land trusts or whatever.
And then, to see which level of government would be responsible for that then?
It's usually a combination. Yeah.
And my apologies for my voice here. Frances Bula is with me. We're going to take your calls for the next few minutes here, asking you for your thoughts on Gregor Robertson, former Vancouver mayor, now becoming housing minister. What do you think of the choice? How do you think he'll do? And what are the priorities that you'd like for him to have? 1-800-825-5950. 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. A lot of emails coming in as well. Andrew writes from Sapperton, the financialization of homes and rentals by corporations is a major task for Gregor Robertson. That's from Andrew in Sapperton. And Carol writes that it's a terrible new cabinet. Mark Carney's first cabinet is less a vision for Canada's future than a reward for loyalty, celebrity, and political convenience. It's a lineup that feels like it was assembled more in a PR boardroom than on the basis of principle or public service. Several appointments and omissions are cause for deep concern. And she goes through a list here, but on Gregor Robertson, it's a baffling choice, Sophie writes. As Vancouver's mayor, Robertson oversaw a crisis of affordability. Speculation, gentrification, and luxury development exploded under his watch, while average families were priced out of the city. He talked green and governed for the wealthy. Now, with housing in crisis nationwide, we're handing him the keys. That's from Carol Bax. Thanks so much for your email, Carol from Victoria. bctoday@cbc.ca is our email address. And let's take another call here now from Joseph in Vancouver. Hi, Joseph.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for taking my call.
Yeah, go ahead. What are your thoughts?
I realize that private builders, obviously their market is more affluent housing and so on. It's just the way the economy works. But if we let economic forces take over, and we don't keep the regulations for no foreign investment and so on, all the wealth is built from home ownership. Not only can we not afford to own a home and we have to rent, there's 150 million millionaires in China alone. You have India that's becoming more affluent. As long as Canada or Vancouver or Canada itself is a world place to go and invest, and they can, we have people in Vancouver that cannot afford to own a home. No chance of it. 80% of the people that work regular jobs can't even afford to live without 2 or 3 roommates.
Have you been affected by this, Joseph?
Yeah, I have, actually.
Yeah.
Our story. I actually, after COVID, ended up spending some time homeless. And I used to live in Yaletown with an affluent life. So it was quite a shock. But the reality is, this will continue on and get worse. Not only will we not be able to afford to purchase and build that generational wealth, the baby boomer wealth that's inherited is going to be squandered. There's no way that will build on. Everybody will stay in this housing poverty until it just continues on generation and generation after. Unfortunately, the builders are going to have to adapt to a regulated environment, I think, where we make it possible for Canadians to continue to own homes and somehow nip this in the bud before it gets worse.
Yeah. I mean, my goodness, what you've been through. So do you have any faith that you're going to be able to own a home? Like, is that a dream for you still?
No, I lived in Ottawa at one point, and I had a 3-bedroom house. And when I moved here, I kind of accepted, like, well, I'm not going to be able to own here, but I always expected I'd be able to go elsewhere in Canada. But, after COVID and how things went, I just don't ever see the opportunity to purchase a home, which is unfortunate. So my chance at that generational wealth is gone. But I just see everyone in the city, like, it's a problem for many people. Like, it's on the radio, it's persistent, and it's not only Vancouver.
Joseph, I'm really glad you called. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thanks a lot.
Take care. Jörg is our last caller now in Kelowna. Hi, Jörg.
Hi.
Yeah, go ahead. What are your thoughts on the job before Gregor Robertson right now?
Yeah, so the primary point is that there is no such thing as affordable housing that is new built. So it would have to be subsidized. And that's just part of the reality. And talk around that just doesn't work. Number two, so one of the earlier callers said something about the future is rental housing. I personally think that from a societal point of view, that is dead wrong as an approach.
Why?
But we have to approach, well, because people will not have equity in their homes for their old age. My in-laws, if they hadn't had equity in their home, they could not have aged out in a residential care facility that was not fully paid for. Yeah. And so if you're going to push everybody to rental housing, then you may as well increase pension benefits by 3 times so that people can actually afford their retirement.
Jörg, thank you so much. And you've gotten to, pardon me, I'm sorry to jump in, but you've gotten to that point about generational wealth that our previous caller, Joseph, got to. I have about 30 seconds. Frances, you're going to be watching this pretty closely, I'm sure.
I am, and I'll be interested to see the mark that Gregor Robertson makes. We had a pretty strong housing minister before, Sean Fraser, but who was kind of more out there, more willing to tussle publicly. Gregor Robertson is not like that. He's not your typical retail politician. He's more reserved. So I'm going to be interested to see how he takes charge, maybe changes some of the policies in the campaign and takes charge.
I'm so glad to have you here today. Thank you.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you.
Frances Bula writes on urban issues and city politics for the Globe and Mail. And thanks for joining us here on CBC. And tonight is the finale. We're going to hear from Canada's Got Talent's finalists in just a moment here. But we have a lot of emails as well coming in when it comes to Gregor Robertson and housing. Val writes, whenever I hear about the rental housing and condo industry falling, I think of empty units for people seeking affordable housing. Why doesn't the government purchase those buildings and turn the units into affordable housing units? Assets for government, housing for those in need. Thank you very much. Faye writes from Victoria, we need government back in housing. The developers are not building the housing that is needed. Instead of building actual units people can live in, they build housing that makes them the most money. And most developers do not like being told what to do. I think it was very good when government was involved, as we had buildings that were realistic to the needs of people. Again, our email address is bctoday@cbc.ca. And another email from Graham, who's asking about the impacts of REITs, real estate investment trusts, on rental costs and tenant displacement. That's been an issue that's come up for sure as well when it comes to housing affordability. Graham, thank you very much for that. And Alfred, and we have some more emails coming in here as well. I'm just trying to get through them now. But again, our email address is bctoday@cbc.ca. Do keep them coming, and we'll put them together for the next show as well. Well, tonight is the finale of the competition show Canada's Got Talent, and Vancouver's Carsim Birmingham has sung his way to the final stretch. Here's the moment he got selected as Cardinal's Golden Buzzer.
Next to you.
Well, yesterday I had the pleasure of speaking with Carsim Birmingham just ahead of the finale. I have to say, I was blown away by your voice. Where does that voice come from?
Thank you. Nice to meet you too. I think it definitely comes from God. I don't have anybody in my family that's particularly musically inclined.
Really?
So I'm the only person. So I do think it's just a gift being given to my family.
Wow. When did you first realize that you had this gift?
I think I felt I had a gift at the age of maybe, let's say, 12. My mom told me that I started singing at 5, but really being cognizant of how good I was, so to speak, was at the age of 12 or 11.
Wow. What was the first song that you remember really belting out?
I think it would maybe be some sort of song from Disney Channel, some sort of Hannah Montana. I think just the introduction song of Hannah Montana. That would most likely be one of those songs, or something that's gospel, because I really grew up in a Catholic sort of environment. So it would maybe be some sort of church song.
Well, your talent is undeniable, and your story is really heartwarming. Can you tell me about it? You moved to Vancouver. So tell me about your childhood and what drew you to moving to Canada.
Yeah. So I was raised up I grew up on a small island in the Caribbean called Dominica. Commonly gets confused with the Dominican Republic. But it's a small, charming island. And growing up there was very beautiful in a sense. I had so many things accessible to me, and my family supported me in every way, especially during me realizing that I was a singer. And I decided to move to Canada initially due to my studies. So I studied at UBC, I studied French, and I always knew along the way that I was going to do something big with my talent, that is singing. And the biggest stage that I could think of was Canada's Got Talent. And I knew that there was no other individual with a story like mine coming from my country and actually going forward on a platform as big as this. And I wanted to represent them, show my story, and just show the world my talent.
Why is it so important for you to have this big stage?
I think it's important because I've always felt at a very young age that there is a part of me that's supposed to be seen by other individuals. I think there are so many hardships that we go through as individuals on a day-to-day basis, and having someone like me show it in a really real sense. I'm really plucked from the Caribbean. I'm on a big stage, and it is a wholesome sort of story, in my opinion. So I wanted people to be able to relate to that, find happiness and peace, and possibly the inspiration to take on their dreams and pursue it with every ounce of, energy that they have in their body.
Wow. How has it been for you to be able to express yourself through music?
I think it's always been, even more so now, really emotional. I think this entire journey from my audition and up till now, the finale, I think the journey has been one of true blossoming. I never have imagined that I would have been able to come on stage, show who I am authentically, all of me, to the entire world. And I think it's just been a beautiful process that I'm capable of possibly enlightening other people to find within themselves the courage to just chase their dreams and do what makes them feel really happy.
How much of a challenge was that, or was it a challenge for you to be authentically yourself?
it was a big challenge. I had a lot of fears that, I would be judged back home from individuals who I may not have, spoken about my sexuality, or individuals who may have known me just normally, but I never really told them. I think it was very challenging in that sense, but it was also challenging for me personally because I had to decide whether or not I wanted to have that disappointment possibly be felt by other people at the cost of possibly being happy. And I know it sounds quite easy to choose happiness, but it's sort of a guilt in a sense of knowing that what I have and the happiness that I could have would make others feel down about who I am fully. But I'm embracing it.
Wow. And so now, I mean, you here you are at the finals. You've made it to the finals. How do you reflect on your journey?
Being in the finale feels incredible, and I haven't even taken the time really to feel all of the emotions. I'm trying to, and just going through all of the things that I need to do in preparation for the finale is what I'm going to try to hone in on, and just try to remember every process, every little moment, capture pictures, because by the blink of an eye, it's going to be done. And that's the only way that I'm going to sort of keep those memories tied and just feel them afterwards, the show's ending.
Will your family be there?
My mom, my family is definitely going to be there, specifically my mom. So my brother is going to be there, my nephew, my boyfriend, and my mom.
How do you think they're going to feel?
I think they're going to feel extremely proud. And for my mom, I know personally it's going to be a life-changing step for her because she's never had the opportunity to see me perform on Canada's Got Talent. So this is going to be the first round she's going to see me. So.
And it's going to be a big moment for you.
Yeah, it's going to be a big moment for everyone in my family.
Congratulations. You deserve it, Carsim. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
And best of luck to Carsim Birmingham, off to the finals of Canada's Got Talent. A $1 million prize up for grabs there. What a talent. All the best to Carsim. That is it for our show. Thank you so much to all of you for calling in and joining our discussion. Again, our email, bctoday@cbc.ca.